Hello and welcome to IBTimes TV. I'm Leanna Brinder, Business Editor for the International Business Times. Joining me now is Dr. Richard Wilson. He's the CEO of Tiga. So hi, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, kicking off with the gaming industry overall, Britain used to be in the upper echelons of one of the top video producing countries in the world, but it slipped. Why did that happen?
Well, it wasn't because of any lack of talent within the UK. The real problem was the fact that our key competitors, particularly in Canada, but also in the United States, introduced very generous tax reliefs for game production. So to give you one example, in Quebec, the regional government there provides support for game development, which is equivalent to 37.5% of the salary costs of game developers. And generally in Canada, you're finding that those studios are being supported by the government are getting help which is equivalent to about a quarter of their turnover. So as you can imagine, when you have a competitor that's getting massive government subsidies in effect to attract studios and attract investment and staff into their jurisdictions, you can imagine that put the UK on the back foot. And so indeed, between 2008 and 2012, we were losing jobs, we were losing investment, and we were losing projects.
Why do you think the gaming industry has always, in a way, been underestimated in how much it contributes to our economy?
Yes, I mean the video games industry in the UK is very important. It contributes about £1 billion UK GDP. It provides very highly skilled employment. Something like 80 to 85% of staff in development studios are qualified to degree level or above. And it's really export focused. About 95% of all the firms in the UK actually export, which is well above the national average of firms within the UK. So it's as you say, it's a very important industry economically. But I think for a long period of time, because it's been seen as a new industry, because it hasn't had the same level of familiarity amongst politicians, amongst policymakers, I think that's probably slowed the ability of the games industry to get recognised.
Why has Britain been so behind then, in the government-wise, in changing this? Because Tiga's been a big campaigner for the gaming tax relief. Tell us a bit about that.
That's right. Tiga's been campaigning for games tax relief for over a decade, but certainly the last 7 years we've run a very focused campaign to get games tax relief. And I think there were probably at least two key factors which have been slowing us down and have slowed the impact of games, slowed the introduction of games tax relief. The first one was political. We managed to convince the last Labour government to introduce the tax relief in their very last budget in 2010. But then, of course, democracy took its course, and the Labour government lost the election, and the new coalition government decided to drop games tax relief. So we weren't back square one, but we were certainly back a square on the board, as it were. So then we had to start a campaign over again. We had to improve the evidence, collect new data, make new connections in government, and we finally convinced the coalition government to support the tax relief in the March 2012 budget. Then the European Union decided to intervene. The European Union doesn't like sector-specific tax breaks, and so we had to convince the European Commission that the video games industry was not only a special case deserving of tax relief, but was also a cultural industry.
Okay, well the GTR is now going to happen, which is great. Can you tell us a bit about the immediate and long-term impact that's going to have on industry and economy?
Yes. So the games tax relief, which we've finally managed to secure, it effectively reduces the cost of game development within the UK. So the impact of that will be in a number of different ways, actually. Firstly, it'll make it easier for studios to attract investment, to raise capital, and to take on more staff. That will happen quite quickly, actually. Studios will be able to develop games that are eligible for games tax relief and begin to grow their operations, take on more staff, develop more games. In the more medium term and longer term, the impact will be to, I think, make the UK games industry more sustainable. So over the last few years, we've seen lots of new studios emerge, which has been very exciting, but unfortunately we've seen a lot of closures as well. And it's partly because, as we discussed earlier on, because we've been competing on this unlevel playing field. With the games tax relief in operation, UK studios will have a greater chance of becoming more sustainable and enduring. So that's a very important medium-term development. I think it will also lead to additional investment in the industry. We're predicting about £188 million of additional investment over 5 years, and we're expecting about another 4,600 highly skilled jobs being created over 5 years. And looking perhaps even a little further ahead, I think it will also give a boost to higher educational establishments in the UK. Many universities provide courses in game development. Because the industry is growing, there'll be more interest on the part of students to go to these universities. Many of these universities have good connections with development staff, with development studios, and so I think you'll see an upsurge in student numbers in higher education who want to study games courses. So the long-term effect is not only is the UK games industry going to become more sustainable and more competitive, and will hopefully go back up the league tables, but it's also going to have fringe benefits, as it were, or spin-off benefits to higher education.
Great. And I suppose future trends and developments emerging from this, because of the caveats over the games tax relief in terms of cultural caveats, can you maybe explain a little bit more about that and maybe how that may shape the types of games being produced in the UK?
Yes, the campaign to get games tax relief in the UK had to be predicated on the fact that culturally British video games were undersupplied. That was one of the key reasons, one of the key arguments we had to advance to the European Commission, and we showed evidence that demonstrated that many games in the UK become Americanised or internationalised, as it were, and lose their British flavour. So to benefit from the games tax relief, the game will have to pass a cultural test. To pass the cultural test, games will have to show that they draw upon some elemental British or European economic area cultural identity. So that might mean the game is based on some kind of book, literature, a sport, history, myths and legends within the UK or the European Union. Crucially though, and we're really pleased about this and we campaign for this, if a game is set in a location that cannot be determined, or if the lead characters are characters that are a species that cannot be determined, you can still get points on the cultural test. So in very, very simple terms, what that really means is that fantasy games or science fiction games can still get points on this cultural test, which is very, very important. They also get points for the practitioners within studios, so the lead programmers, the lead designers, the lead script writers will all contribute to the cultural test or help a studio pass the cultural test. I think the games that will struggle to pass the cultural test will be more in the region of puzzle games. I think that it'll be harder to show puzzle games or quiz games necessarily pass a cultural test. But certainly those games that are based upon history, myths and legends, literature, and perhaps draw upon television and film within the UK, film and television productions that have already existed, they will certainly pass.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
And that was Dr. Richard Wilson. He's the CEO of Tiga.